He only needed one evening, one night to remember he was still a man, not just a father, a baker, a person held together by early mornings and flour and a grief he had nowhere left to put. His friend signed him up for a parent's mixer. Simple. Safe. Except Owen wrote down the wrong room. Now Liam was standing in a line of tailored suits and expensive watches, holding a card that said Table 7 directly across from Scarlett Voss, the coldest CEO in the city. She looked at his worn flannel and said, "Do you know what kind of event this is?" He smiled. "I do. But I already paid for my spot." He came to the wrong room and found exactly the right person. This is a story you will not put down. He had been awake since 5 that morning. That was not unusual. Liam had been waking before sunrise for 4 years. Ever since the morning he realized that if he did not get up first, nobody would. The bakery was small, a corner space on a quiet block, not famous, not written up in any magazine, not the kind of place people photographed their coffee in front of. It was the kind of place where the smell reached the street before the lights came on, and regulars knew the door handle stuck on cold days and had to be lifted slightly before it would open. Liam had learned to bake because his wife, Claire, had loved bread. Not artisan bread, not sourdough with a heritage starter, just bread, warm, dense, honest bread that made a house feel lived in. When Claire died in a car accident 2 years after Bonnie was born, Liam had no language for explaining loss to a child who was still learning words, so he had baked instead. He turned the grief into something Bonnie could hold in both hands. 4 years later, the bakery was still there. So was Bonnie. So, in ways he could not always account for, was he? Owen arrived before the shop opened that Thursday morning, coming through the back entrance the way he always did, holding his phone in front of him like evidence. Owen was Liam's oldest friend, the kind of person who experienced life at a comfortable distance from its harder consequences and remained cheerful because of it. He announced that he had registered Liam for a singles event that evening. A community gathering, he said. Parents, mostly. People who understood the particular fatigue of doing everything for someone else. "You need to be around adults," Owen said, pouring himself coffee he had not been offered. "You need to remember what it feels like to have a conversation that doesn't involve cartoon characters or loose teeth." Liam said no. Owen listed reasons. Liam continued saying no while dividing dough. Then Bonnie came downstairs in her pajamas, carrying the stuffed rabbit she had slept with every night since she was 3, looked at the two of them arguing in the kitchen, and said, with the calm authority of a child who had been paying attention, "Just go, Dad, I can sleep fine." She was 6 years old, and already trying to give him space. That undid him faster than anything Owen had said. Before he left that evening, Bonnie ran to the small table near the window where she kept her drawing supplies, and came back with a folded piece of paper. She pressed it into the front pocket of his flannel, patting it twice to make sure it stayed. When Liam tried to look at it, she shook her head. "Open it later," she said, in the tone of someone who had given the matter serious thought. He kissed her forehead, thanked Mrs. Ellis from the apartment upstairs who came to sit with Bonnie on evenings like this, and walked out into a cool Thursday night without any particular expectations about what the next few hours would bring. The Meridian was the kind of hotel that made Liam feel like he had walked into someone else's life by accident. The lobby had the particular brightness of spaces designed to remind you of your own inadequacy: high ceilings, marble surfaces, staff who moved with the practiced calm of people, trained to notice everything while appearing to notice nothing. Owen walked ahead, checking his phone, and led them to the 3rd floor. He pointed at a door and said, "That's it. Go in. I'll be right back." And then his phone rang, and he disappeared around the corner. Liam stood in the hallway and read the sign beside the door. It did not say what Owen had described. It said, "Executive Speed Connect, private invitation only." Beside it, in smaller text, Voss Capital Group Corporate Networking Series. Down the hall, considerably quieter, and with a handmade sign taped at eye level, was room 3B. Community Singles Mixer, all parents welcome. Liam looked at one door, then the other. He was standing in the wrong line. He turned to leave, but the check-in table was already in motion. A young woman with a headset and a clipboard who would later introduce herself as Madison was scanning the remaining arrivals list with the expression of someone whose evening had just gone mildly sideways. One confirmed guest had canceled 20 minutes ago. She looked at Liam. She looked at the time. She looked back at Liam, and made the kind of decision that only people managing events under pressure are capable of making. Fast, pragmatic, and entirely consequential. "Name?" she said. Liam told her. She wrote something on the clipboard and handed him a card with the number 7 on it. "Table 7, she said. "Go ahead." Liam walked in because he did not know what else to do. He found table 7 near the center of the room, sat down, and understood, with quiet certainty, that he was in entirely the wrong place. The room was all dark wood and low light, and the particular stillness of people performing ease rather than feeling it. Every person Liam could see was dressed in the kind of clothes that were not purchased for occasions. They were the default. The men wore watches that could have funded his Lo Nung repair twice over. The women moved through the room with the composure of people who had long since stopped being surprised by anything. Liam looked at his hands and noticed, on the underside of his left thumbnail, a thin, white line of dried flour he had missed when washing up. He was thinking about whether to leave quietly before the event started when the chair across from him pulled back, and Scarlett Voss sat down. He did not know who she was. That was the first thing, the thing that changed everything that came after. Scarlett had spent years navigating rooms where every person she encountered had already formed an opinion of her before she opened her mouth. They had read the profiles, seen the photographs, registered the name. Their expressions when she appeared carried a familiar weight, calculation, deference, and sometimes the particular nervousness of people who wanted something from her. Liam looked at her the way a person looks at someone they have never seen before, with ordinary, uncomplicated attention. She sat down. He nodded. That was all. She asked her question about the event, and he answered it simply, and the simplicity of that answer did something to the next 3 minutes that she could not immediately explain. She had prepared, as always, for a room full of people performing sophistication. She had not prepared for someone who had nothing to perform. The format gave each pair 8 minutes before the bell rang, and partners rotated. Scarlett had intended to use her 8 minutes efficiently to ask the kind of questions that communicated, clearly and without rudeness, that this was a professional exercise and not an opportunity. What did he run? What was the annual revenue? What were his expansion plans? She asked. He answered. A small bakery on a quiet street. Revenue enough to cover what it needed to cover. Expansion plans involving a broken oven he had been meaning to fix since the previous month. She had no prepared response for any of it. Not because the answers were impressive, they were not, by any metric she had spent her career applying, but because there was no gap between what he said and what he meant, and she had forgotten what that sounded like. She sat with the strangeness of it. He sat, comfortable in the silence, looking at the room with the patient curiosity of someone who had spent years starting conversations across a bakery counter with whoever happened to come through the door. The bell rang. People at the surrounding tables stood and shifted. Liam moved to stand. Scarlett placed one hand briefly on the edge of the table, not reaching for him, not stopping him exactly, and said, in a voice that was more statement than invitation, "You can stay." He stayed. He did not ask why. A few minutes later, in the space that opened up when neither of them had a script to follow, he mentioned Bonnie. He mentioned the event that a friend had signed him up because, as he put it without drama, I apparently needed reminding that I still exist outside of the bakery. She asked how long he had been raising her alone. 4 years, he said. His wife had died. Bonnie was too. There was no family nearby. Just Owen, and the early mornings, and the flour, and the rhythm of making something people needed. He did not say any of it looking for a reaction. He said it the way people describe geography matter-of-factly, because it was simply the landscape of his life. Scarlett did not say she was sorry. Everyone said they were sorry. It had become a kind of verbal punctuation, something placed at the end of a statement to signal that the speaker had acknowledged the weight of it and was now ready to move forward. She did not do that. Instead, she asked, "What are you most afraid of?" He looked at her for a moment, as if checking whether the question was serious. It was. He thought about it for long enough that she could tell he was not assembling an answer that would land well. He was actually looking for the true one. Then he said, "That one day Bonnie will realize her father wasn't enough. Not enough money, not enough house, not enough resume, just enough." The particular fear of a person who gives everything they have and still cannot be sure it adds up to what someone deserves. The room was loud around them. She barely heard it. She had not expected to speak honestly that evening. She rarely spoke honestly in rooms where people could see her face while she did it. But something about the cadence of the conversation, the fact that it had started without pretense and stayed that way, shifted something in the usual architecture of her defenses. She was about to say something real when he asked, "What about you? What are you most afraid of?" Nobody had asked her that question in years. Not in any meeting, not in any evaluation, not in any conversation conducted anywhere she could remember. People asked Scarlett Voss what she was planning, what she was building, what she was protecting. Nobody asked what she was afraid of. She looked at him. He was looking back, not with the eager expectancy of someone hunting for leverage, but with the plain curiosity of a person who wanted to know. She did not answer, but she did not look away. She knew, in the part of herself that was always tracking the room even when she seemed not to be, that Diana was watching. Diana had been a member of the board for 9 years, the kind of person who cultivated patience, the way other people cultivated ambition, waiting for exactly the right moment to apply exactly the right pressure. The board had asked Scarlett to attend this event for one reason. The restructuring vote was 5 weeks away, and Diana had spent the better part of 6 months building a narrative around Scarlett's emotional unavailability. Not incompetence. Scarlett's performance record made incompetence impossible to argue. But the softer case. That a woman who had spent 12 years becoming indistinguishable from her work title was not the right figure to lead a company through a period that required, as Diana framed it with characteristic delicacy, a more human touch. The event was supposed to counter that. A public appearance. A few photographs of Scarlett Voss in a room with other people, not appearing to actively wish they would leave. Instead, she was sitting at table 7 with a baker in a flannel shirt, talking past the 8-minute bell. Madison appeared at her elbow and said, quietly, that people were noticing the extended stay at one table. Scarlett did not move. A moment later, Diana crossed the room with the unhurried confidence of someone who had already decided what she was going to say. She introduced herself to Liam with warmth that was technically indistinguishable from the real thing, asked his name, asked what company he represented, made a small sound of interest when he said he had wandered into the wrong event. Then she said, to no one in particular, that Scarlett rarely stayed at any table as long as this. It sounded like a compliment. It was not. She moved away. Scarlett watched her go, and then, with the precise economy of someone who does not explain herself, told Liam briefly what the event actually was, what its purpose had been, and why she was there. He listened. Then he said, without cruelty, "So you came to the wrong place too. Just in a different way." She did not smile, but the muscles of her jaw, which had been set in their professional position since she walked into the building, loosened, very slightly, at one corner. Madison returned with news that a photographer from a financial trade publication was in the room. The image of Scarlett Voss, spending an extended private conversation with an unknown man at a corporate networking event, was the kind of thing that could be shaped into several different stories, depending on who was writing. Scarlett stood. She was already calculating the exit, already reassembling the composure that the evening had briefly disturbed, when she stopped and asked, and even she could not have explained why, "What do you bake best?" It was the only question all evening that had nothing to do with strategy or management, or the particular chess game she had been playing since walking through the door. Liam answered without hesitation. She was already walking away when he finished, but she heard every word. The story appeared on page 6 of a financial trade publication the following morning. The photograph was small and not particularly revealing Scarlett in profile, in a room of suited figures. And behind her, barely in frame, the dark blue flannel back of a man at table 7. Owen saw it first. He arrived at the bakery before the first customers, held his phone up toward Liam without saying anything, and waited. Liam looked at the photograph for a moment. Then he went back to the bread. Owen said several things in rapid succession, most of which Liam did not register. At the office on the 38th floor of the Voss Capitol building, Madison placed the printed page on Scarlett's desk, without comment. Scarlett read the caption, read the image. The photograph was too small to identify anyone clearly. But she knew the specific shade of dark blue in that flannel. She had been looking at it across a small table for long enough that she could have drawn it from memory. That same evening, Liam was moving laundry from the basket to the machine when the folded paper fell from the breast pocket of the flannel. He had forgotten it was there. He opened it carefully, smoothing the creases with his thumb. Bonnie had drawn 3 figures standing in front of a building that was meant, he understood, to be the bakery, a square with a rectangle for a door and 2 circles in the window that were either decorations or eyes, depending on how generously you read the draftsmanship. The first figure was tall, with short, dark lines for hair. The second was very small, with a round head and 2 lines for legs. The third figure stood to the left of the first, tall, with long hair that curved out at the ends, wearing what Bonnie had carefully rendered as a triangular dress, and 2 small rectangles at the feet that were clearly meant to be heeled shoes. Liam held the drawing for a long time. Then he set it on the shelf above the machine, leaned against the wall, and realized he was smiling without having decided to. Diana, by that point, had made 2 phone calls. The first was to Scarlett, a brief, pleasant exchange in which she mentioned the photograph and expressed, in the tone of someone performing concern, that she hoped it would not become a distraction ahead of the restructuring review. The second call was to a journalist she had worked with before, which she placed from a personal number. That night, Scarlett asked Madison to find the address of the bakery. Madison asked why. Scarlett gave her the answer she had prepared. She wanted to try the baked goods. Madison wrote down the address and said nothing, because knowing when not to ask follow-up questions was part of why she had kept this job for 6 years. She arrived on Wednesday morning at 7:23. No driver, no Madison, no calendar alert that would record this visit as a scheduled commitment. She wore the gray cashmere she wore when she had early meetings, which was close enough to normal that it did not feel like she had dressed for something she was unwilling to name. The bakery's door stuck slightly on the left side, and she had to lift the handle before it opened. Inside, the light was warm, and the smell was the specific combination of butter and heat that settles into the walls of places where this is done every single day, and not just on occasion. Liam was behind the counter. He looked up and registered her presence with the equanimity of someone who had spent years greeting people who came through that door, in all conditions and moods and states of mind. He did not look surprised. He looked, if anything, like he had been expecting something, though he could not have said what. "Croissant or garlic bread?" he said. It was the most ordinary sentence she had heard all week. Bonnie appeared before Scarlett could answer. She came from the corner table near the window where she had been eating breakfast, wearing her school uniform with the top button undone. And she stopped in front of Scarlett and looked up at her with the frank, thorough appraisal that only young children and very honest adults are capable of. Then she said, "Are you the person from my drawing?" The bakery had 2 other customers at the far table. They did not look up. Liam went very still behind the counter. Scarlett looked down at the small girl with the direct brown eyes and the question that had no tactical layer whatsoever, just a child asking a thing she genuinely wanted to know.